Hey there, guys, and thank you for tuning back into my YouTube channel. So I'm going to talk about overload methods and, basically how I use them in order to increase my bench press. So as you'll currently see, I'm just doing my regular bench press, and I always do that first before using any overload method. Um, you know, and if I'm going to go quite heavy or do a lot of overload methods in general, I'll try and cut back on the volume of the traditional bench that I'm going to do. So I only did two working sets, two sets of 7, and I called it there before using a different method to improve. So with overload, there's two things that I like. I either like using a board press or a foam press. The foam press that I'm doing now, I find works better for raw lifting. I like having the foam because I get the spring out the base, and the weight, unlike a board, it doesn't go dead on the chest. Like with a board press, typically you're using a piece of wood, you come down and wood doesn't have spring to it. Yes, it'll help dissipate the force over your chest, especially if you've brought it down quick or bounced it off. But that's not the point of it. Like a board press for me, I'll use more if I'm doing equipped lifting, and it's to get an idea of how far I'm bringing the bar down while wearing a bench shirt that I'm trying to get used to. So I'm not after a spring off the board because I get the spring from the bench shirt. With raw lifting, if you're using a board and you come down, as I said, you just don't get the spring. It's quite a dead feeling. In a way, you could almost just do partial reps or pin presses would work very much the same as a board press, but not exactly the same because the steel safety rails, when you come down, that's going to really be a dead stop versus the board. Yes, the board doesn't have any give to it, but your rib cage as a whole is still going to have a little bit of spring due to the compression and how much weight you decide to unload off the board and into your body. So going back to what I prefer to use currently, it's definitely the foam press. So I like the spring that I get from it, and that just mimics a slingshot quite well. And yeah, it feels better in the hands, and I can really gauge how much I'm like putting force into the foam roller. If I'm unloading, 20 or 50 kilos, you can feel it sink further in. You can sort of feel the compression on your chest, but not the same way as a board would. Also, if I have a minor injury like I currently do now, my left shoulder's not playing nice, I want to sort of reduce the range of motion. So with your traditional bench, when you're bringing the bar down to your chest, when it hits, your chest, that your shoulder joint is in a state of extension. So the greater the arch, when you set up, as long as you don't turn it into like a circus joke lift, the more of an arch you have, the less shoulder extension you'll have at the base of the movement. And it's the shoulder extension that tends to hurt a lot of lifters. And that's just due to stability, and it may not necessarily be the deltoid itself at all. It could be any of the rotator cuff muscles, and they just can't stabilize and they become aggravated. But regardless of the exact muscle that is failing, I'm not going to say the mechanism of injury, but just having the shoulder in such a degree of shoulder extension is never really going to be pleasant if you've got an underlying injury. So for me, my left shoulder's not playing nice. I'm going to reduce the range of motion and, keep it, more in that top end movement. And then at the base, I'm not trying to stabilize as much because the foam, I can sink it into the foam. So in reality, I almost have 3 points of contact as opposed to just my two hands on either side. I then have like the foam, which sort of stabilizes it to an extent as it comes down. Not quite the same as, when you touched on your chest, but the foam and just how much you can then easily sink into it because it has a lot more give, obviously, than your chest does. So I like that extra stability at the base of the movement as well as the extra spring on the way up. The other thing I find with, the foam press or board press for that matter is, if I'm getting 7 reps, that's what I got. I'm able to increase the amount of reps. If I have a minor injury, I won't increase the weight. I'll just chase higher reps. If everything's feeling good and holding up well, then yes, I can definitely increase the weight that I'm using without risking, injury. And it's also something, lifters might use just to get accustomed to holding, heavy weights. For some people, it's a confidence thing. For other people, they just become better at stabilizing heavier weights because they're just holding them, more frequently. So, if you're going from 7 reps to 12 reps, you're getting a lot more time under tension than what you normally would. And from a stability point of view, your stabilizers are going to have to work a lot more. I'm not going to call it endurance work for them, but the set has almost doubled in length at times. So, it's a win-win in that regard. There are a few other, methods like bands and chains, but I'm going to touch on them in a different video. But as I said, when it comes to raw lifting, I really enjoy the foam press. In terms of sets, anywhere from 2 to 4 sets works really well. Obviously, this video and the traditional bench and the foam press, they're just on repeat. So for this session, I only did 2 working sets and then 2 sets of the foam press because I was just, taking quite a conservative approach. I want my shoulders to still heal. Today is Thursday, the day after bench. Everything feels quite good. Still a little bit stiff, but definitely doesn't feel aggravated. So, I'm still making forward progress in terms of healing, but I'm also not having to worry about my lift or weights dropping. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to comment below. Otherwise, have a great day wherever you are.